Halo Epitaph has just given some additional context to some of the Didact's direct experiences over his expansive lifetime, and the implications of the new emergent lore that comes as a consequence completely uproot all we know about the precursors, the Flood, Forerunners and humanity, and the very nature of both the Domain and the Mantle of Responsibility. And in true fashion, we're going to dive into this deep lore and uncover all the deepest information we can to better understand this new paradigm. Roll the intro. Halo Epitaph, the most recent Halo novel, has released, chronicling the journey of the Didact following his composition at the hands of the Master Chief between the events of Halo 4 and Halo 5. And while the Didact finds himself in an arid desert wasteland, with an enigmatic azure tower in the distance beckoning him, his journey would take him to the Domain and even back into the real world, if in esoteric form, and across the cosmos at incredible speeds. Time in this esoteric realm evidently doesn't flow like it does in the normal dimensions of space-time, so the actual period of time covered by this book spans somewhere between his composition and sometime after Cortana's sacrifice on Zeta Halo. In between these 2 points, many pieces of information are gleaned. Many of his lifetime experiences are extrapolated and given additional context, and a few of them have very significant implications for the deep lore of the Halo universe. And that is the subject of today's video. So before we get started, I will warn you, this video will contain spoilers for the book Halo Epitaph. If you have read the book or listened to the audiobook or simply don't care, continue to listen. If you haven't and don't want it to be spoiled, I recommend you go and pick up a copy of Halo Epitaph or listen to the audiobook on audible.com. Afterwards you can return here enriched with its knowledge and indulge in the revelations that are to follow. You have been warned. The Didact has found himself in an esoteric wasteland on the periphery of the Domain. He is in a weakened, damaged state and is brimming with rage and vengeance, still very much in keeping with the Didact we know from the events of Halo 4. He still lusts for the downfall of humanity, for their subjugation and composition to bolster his forces of Promethean war machines, so that he may protect the Mantle of Responsibility as he sees it in an enforced peace, ultimately assuring Forerunner ascendance. This, as I'm sure you'll agree, are many of the similar motivations that we saw Cortana go through during her rise with the Created and her desire to enforce just such a peace across the galaxy with the Guardians. Without getting too bogged down into the particulars, the Didact knows that in order to achieve his goals, he needs to access the Domain. He finds, however, that he is not alone in this wasteland. He is joined by millions of other Forerunners, thousands of ancient and modern humans, as well as a Forerunner Haruspis and the human AI known as Cortana. Cortana is attempting to gain access to the Domain as well to enforce her peace as she sees it, but is being blocked by the Warden Eternal. The Warden equally chooses to block the Didact's access to the Domain as well. As we know from the events of Halo 5, Cortana does indeed gain access to the Domain and begins her reclamation of the Mantle of Responsibility. Plagued by visions of his past and enraged by Cortana's access of the Domain, the Didact, with the help of the Haruspis, manages to gain access to the Domain as well. The Domain is in a partially downed and damaged state, having been denied the sustenance of new experiences and essences being fed into the Domain to add to its immense archives of knowledge. During several contacts with the Domain, as well as plagued with the visions and dreams of his past when he's in the Wastelands, the Didact begins to relive aspects of his past, and both recovers and relives deeply suppressed aspects of his memories, as well as some traumatic memories that have been unknowingly kept from him. During these incursions and regressions of memory, we as the reader experience these memories from the Didact's perspective, as if the events were playing out in front of us once more. And arguably one of the most important memories that the Didact was forced to re-experience and relive was his contact with the Gravemind in the Burn during the height of the Fauna Flood War. Many of us will recall from the original trilogy of fauna books as written by the late great Greg Bear, that the Didact and a few other faunas were imprisoned within stasis fields on a wrecked fauna ship and sent into a burn, a region of space populated and infected by the flood, basically a huge quarantine zone within space, that no life could exist safe from flood infestation. In string 12 of the book Silentium, it is confirmed the Didact is brought before the Gravemind, the same consciousness of the primordial that he had interrogated 10,000 years prior. This part of the Didact's testimony literally ends with the Gravemind speaking, "Didact, do you have a moment? Just a moment. That's all it will take." At this point in the book, the event sequence breaks, and the catalogue, who is receiving the Didact's deposition, asks if he's claiming that he's had a second conversation with the primordial, to which the Didact responds, "It wasn't a conversation, more like a malediction." This time, the primordial was in complete control. We are given no further information on exactly what was spoken about during this time, as the Didact either has repressed memories or simply refuses to discuss it. That is until Halo Epitaph, when he is forced to re-experience and re-remember these series of events, and it is in this moment that new information comes forward that somewhat confirms a theory I brought forward 3 years ago, and adds a layer to the deep lore that is more alarming than I care to mention. I made a video on this specific subject revisiting the events of the Fauna trilogy, and looked into the particular interactions between the primordial, the last precursor, and the first Gravemind, and its conversations, lapsed though they were, with ancient humanity. The primordial's responses were vague at best, but when asked about the nature of the flood, it gave an answer that was so horrific that the ancient humans stood in front of the primordial, committed suicide as a consequence. So the video asked a very simple question. What was it that the primordial said that was so horrific, that caused this immensely noble and sophisticated version of ancient humanity, with a superior grasp of the universe, reality, and esoterics, to drive them to end their own lives as the only viable alternative? And the theory that I brought forward was simply this: the precursors and the flood are one and the same thing. The flood are not a corrupted version of the precursors. The flood are the precursors. The theory I suggested was that the precursors seeded life, created humanity, the faunas, and countless other species so that they would rise and grow and experience, and then the flood would come to consume them all and reintegrate their experiences into the living universe. The theory simply posited that all of life that has been seeded by the precursors are naught but cattle, raised to be slaughtered. And for the 3 years since I posited that theory, it has remained just that: a theory, theoretical, not confirmed. Until now. During the Didact's re-experience of his memories with the primordial, with the Gravemind, the conversation that ended in Silentium with "Do you have a moment, Didact? Just a moment. That's all it will take," continues with startling revelations. The Gravemind goes on to confirm the identity of the Didact, confirming his name, Shadow of Sundered Star, Didact, protector of the Ecumene. The Didact knew of whom was speaking almost instinctually, the one that he had met on Chatham Hakor. The Gravemind confirmed, "We are the same. That one, this one, others." The Gravemind goes on to confirm that they took the mantle of responsibility away from the Faunas, and like petulant children, the Faunas rose up and killed their parents. That all other species that could fall to the flood have yet to know suffering, and that they will visit that upon them with unrelenting dedication. And the most truly telling revelations read as follows. That which we create, we also destroy. Just as you were set to destroy us, that is why we rose against you, the Didact responded. Forerunners, humans, millions of other species from the dawn of time, beyond and before. We create. We delete. It is our nature. It is our right. The Didact replies, you breathe hypocrisy. And forerunners never see the mantle for what it is, a test merely, and all ultimately fail. Humanity will be tested next, and like you, they will feed and grow fat on preeminence and power, on hubris and righteousness, and when they are at their ripest, the flood will feast once more. In those few sentences, the true reality of whom the flood are and whom the precursors are comes into stark clarity, and confirms the theory brought forward 3 years ago on this very channel. The precursors and the flood are the same. They are not different. The flood are not a corrupted version of the precursors. The flood are the other side of the equation. They are the yang to the precursors' yin, the closing of a cycle. The precursors seed life. Life advances and discovers the mantle of responsibility. The mantle feeds that life and allows it to develop and grow, and in the Gravemind's words, become ripe. And then the flood return, to feast upon them. In true Lovecraftian horror, the life that has been seeded by the precursors was seeded only for the slaughter. And the mantle of responsibility, far from being the noble protection and stewardship of the galaxy and all life within it, is a tool left by the precursors to ensure that the life that attains preeminence evolves along desired paths, to ensure the feast to come is all the more delectable. And until next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider smashing the like button and leave a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. Big shout out to my patrons Spartan10148, the Metarch of my installation, Falcon, Prophet Bear, Mikhail, Sophia, and Ashley, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Scarab, Spartan0137, Anthony, Ghost, Aaron, Chris, Jacob, Sean, Element Zero, Somatic, Jordan J3, Dan, Mr. Keys, Directal, Gunslinger, Jacob, Bandmill, Echo, Evermore, Officer Cat, and Personal Devil, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers. And all the other patrons who have jumped aboard to support the channel. It means more to me than I can accurately put into words. Another shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob, Schmitty, Talia, Fenrir and Born Stellar, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Shout out to John for I don't fucking know. And if you want more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos, and consider jumping aboard yourself as a patron or YouTube member to keep the channel alive and kicking. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy everyone, and find peace in the domain.